Hey there, my name's Alexander White, and this week what I thought would be fun to do is to show you how to set up your preamp so you actually get more excitement from the signal, more energy, generally make your signal sound a little bit more robust and a little bit compressed just to help when it comes to mixing, so your tracks fit into your mix much easier. What it basically is finding the preamp sweet spot. So what that actually means is you turn the preamp up just before you actually start to hear some distortion. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to grab my guitar in a second, and I'm actually just going to take you through this stage so you can actually see what you're listening out for. Now, before we actually start with that, one of the important things is you need a certain kind of preamp, and that is a character preamp. So basically what doesn't work is audio interface preamps. They are actually excellent. Audio interface preamps, things like Focusrite or anything by Apogee or any clean preamp, they're all absolutely excellent, but they are clean. And what that means is they really don't add or change or adjust the signal in any reasonably audible way. You can measure some of these changes, but hearing them, they're all so far down, so low down in the dynamic range of the preamp that you just can't hear anything like that. So they're basically clean preamps. Now, the other side of it is the character preamps, and character preamps are, just to name a few brands, things like the Neve 1073. Preamps by API, Universal Audio's 610 or 710 preamp range. Those sorts of preamps, they are character preamps. And, you know, even Rupert Neve, actually, the designer of the Neve 1073, even said he didn't quite understand why people liked it so much because it was really not very linear. But that's the curious thing, is actually totally clean is often something we don't want in music. It's very good if you're trying to do some sort of archival documentary measurement recording, but if you are after a signal which sounds good to our ears, clean isn't necessarily a very good option for that. In fact, I would say most of the time it is not a very good option. When you use those interface preamps to record a clean signal, you just usually end up having to add some of these distortions in the mix later. And here's the thing, is you might say, that's fine, I'll add them in later. The trouble is it makes a difference at the time of recording. If you're driving your preamp hard enough to get some of this harmonic saturation, everything will be easier. The mix will be easier. The performer will have a much better time actually recording, because their voice or their guitar or their trumpet, whatever they're playing, will just sound a bit brighter. It will just sound a bit more energetic. And brighter, I don't mean an EQ kind of brightness, I mean like a sheen across the top. Everything will just sound a bit better. When you turn up the fader, things just slot into place. So the kinds of preamps you need, as I say, you need character preamps. One of my favorites, and something that's very affordable if you can't get into the really expensive stuff, if you can grab a Neve 1073, fantastic, go for it. But the Golden Age Project pre-73 range, that they do like a junior in that one, they do the full like little half rack unit, and then they do all sorts of variations with slightly different EQ adjustments and things like that. Those preamps, you can drive and get some of this harmonic saturation. So, having said all that, let me grab my guitar and I'll actually show you how to dial this in. And I would recommend you use this, you try this on every single source, even if on some sources you go, no, I think I'm going to back it off on that one. Always try. You'd be amazed at how well it works on things like strings, trumpets, drums, absolutely love them, snare drums. You'll be amazed at how much you can distort your preamp before ever it's seeming like it's distorted. It's quite incredible, and yet you just get a much more consistent, much more exciting snare drum sound. So let me grab my guitar, and I'm also going to pop on my headphones. All right, here we go. So if I record enable this track, I have a 1073 preamp in the unison slot. This is also another kind of preamp that you can use if you have the Apollo stuff, because the Apollo unison preamps allow you to drive them. It doesn't overload the converter if you turn these up. If you turn up the normal preamp, just the clean preamp, into distortion, that will hit the converters and distort the converters. So the thing about distorting clean preamps is they're generally designed to have no distortion, no distortion, no distortion, and then at a certain point they just go to pieces and you get a sudden, harsh, nasty overdrive. There's no sort of build up. It's not terribly musical. Whereas these kinds of preamps, the 1073 stuff, it gently moves from clean into overdrive, and at some point you literally hear it as a distortion. So character preamps, or if you happen to have an Apollo, a Universal Audio Apollo, you can also use the unison slot to drive your signal in real time and actually capture that sound on the recording. So first of all, let me just play some of the guitar signal as we've got it coming through right now. Okay, so that is just my little orange Rocker 15 just sat in my recording room in there with a dynamic mic shoved right up on the front of it. Very, very plain sound. There's no reverb on the amp or anything. It's just totally clean, very sort of plain tone. Now, here's our 1073. So what I mean by finding the preamp sweet spot is what we want to do is simply turn the gain up until we actually hear some distortion. So let's do that. What I'll do is I'll be turning this control here up whilst turning this fader down. And just to comment on that, the Neve 1073 from Universal Audio, the plug-in version, actually has lots of different clipping points in it. So for example, you can clip, as in add harmonic distortions, to this fader, as well as you can just using the input and overdriving the input, which is why they give you a clean output here. So you can kind of get two drives if you want to, two slightly different drives, and then back this right off and have a sensible level, actually a sensible record level actually coming into your DAW. Let's find the preamp sweet spot. I'm going to be turning this up and I'm going to be turning this down just to match levels. Let's turn it up some. Okay, you hear that tiny little bite, that little... That's the preamp distorting. If I take it back down and then play again, nothing. Turn it up a couple. Oh, well, let's turn this down to here first. Turn it up a couple. Now, you probably won't use that level of distortion often. Sometimes you do. Always try it in the mix, because you'd be amazed at how much that distortion disappears in the mix. But for this, what we're doing is we're just trying to find that point where we can play normally and we don't hear the distortion. So let's back it off by one and see how that sounds. Still a little bit of distortion. Okay, so that's probably not what we want either. So backing it off one more to where I actually had it originally, what we've actually got now is that those subtle harmonic distortions are that they're only going to affect the very top of the signal, the peaks. And so what we're getting is transients rounding off. We're getting a generally forward sound. We're adding some harmonics throughout the signal. And it's subtle. It's the kind of thing that you notice built up across lots of tracks. As I mentioned, especially as you start to layer your tracks up, or if you're recording a band all at once, you'll find on some tracks you can push this really hard, where in solo you actually go, oh my gosh, I can actually hear the distortion. But when you take it out of solo and listen to the track playing all at once, you kind of find that that distortion just mixes in and makes the track sound bright and energetic and controlled, without it sounding like you've sort of done anything to it. And that's what's really exciting. So I'll just play a little bit more. I'll play some silly things just to, you know, point out how this kind of works. If you listen, I'll play quite hard on those little bar chords and just listen for the tiniest little crackle. That one especially. In fact, I'm just going to bring this fader down even more, just so we don't... I noticed I peaked slightly on the channel. Of course, this is one of these things. When you're doing this kind of process, you do have to watch out for your channels, because it's so easy to just crank this and ignore the signal that's coming in. Really important. Okay, anyway, let's check again. Hear that tiny little buzz? Bit bigger there. All that is the preamp adding that little bit of bite. In the mix, it doesn't come out. It just sits invisibly, giving the guitar extra clarity, extra energy, which also really helps on small speakers and, you know, phones and things that people do in the real world actually listen to music on. So that's basically how you set up your preamp to find the preamp sweet spot. Turn up the gain, get it to the point of distortion, and wind it back just until basically you're at that point where you think, well, I'm right on the edge. The final point to make about all of this is you do probably need to let your performers know. If you're recording someone, or you're of course recording yourself, if you do something really outside of the dynamic range that you're kind of set for the part, so somebody plays the part, right at the end of the song they do something so loud, like they click a distortion pedal or something, they hit the chord and it's way louder, like way louder. Of course, it will probably peak the preamp too much. In those cases, you've just got to ask them to play it again, because a big part of setting this up is to make sure you understand the part. You're actually working in a much narrower dynamic range, but the benefits are huge. You will go into mixing and a lot of your parts will already sound alive and exciting, and the mix time is much reduced. My favourite bit about it is that wonderful thing where the EQ, when you brighten up EQ, sounds just so much better. Because there's all those harmonic distortions, when you turn up the brightness on the EQ, generally you can go further before it starts to sound irritating. And that's because there's simply more information there, more colourful, interesting information all throughout the high end. So, find the preamp sweet spot. Honestly, it will do so much for your mixes. Once in a while you won't need it, but generally, if you get it right, and it will take you time to learn to get it right, you'll really find it impacts your recordings. And one other thing is, if you would like to find out more about mixing and engineering and that sort of thing, please head over to my website and grab my free mixing guide. It's a great next step if you'd like to find out more. It's got tons of information in there, all about mixing, EQ, compression. It's got saturation tips in there, as well as a whole bunch of little kind of techniques that you might not have thought of in order to help you in your mixes. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video has been valuable, and of course please like and subscribe. That stuff means so much. Thank you and have a lovely musical week, and I'll catch up with you on another video next week.